Hey everyone, welcome to another responsive design video. This is video 2 in a series of putting it all together. What I mean by that is I am building a web page from ground up, starting with the HTML, and then adding all of the styles until it's fully responsive. And I'm doing this with a mobile-first perspective. In other words, I'm creating my default styles that'll look good on mobile screens, and then I'll have some breakpoints that'll have it reconfigure itself to look good on a medium-sized screen and a large screen. If you did not watch video 1, then you need to go back and watch it because I'm not going over all the HTML again in this video. So let's take a look at what we've got here. I've got all my HTML that we did in video 1, and then I added something in between these two videos. I added a link to Google Fonts. You may recall that Google Fonts are a series of online fonts that you can use. They're open source. You can use them in any project that you do. They give you a wide variety of fonts to choose from. I chose two fonts, Calistoga and Montserrat, for my project. I'm not going to use them in this video, but I'll use them in future videos as we style this, this website to look better. In this video, my strategy is to set up the main grid for the whole web page. And then I'm going to have some media queries that'll have it to respond to a medium size and a large size screen. Okay? So let's get started. I've got a div called class grid container. And that is going to be the thing where I display grid. And then all of its children, the header, the nav, the feature, the main, the side, and the footer, will be used in the grid template to set up how they're going to be rearranged. So I'm going to start with a style rule for grid template, grid container. I'm going to display grid. Display grid is going to establish it as a grid layout. So any of its children are going to have to obey the rules that I apply here in the grid container. And the first rule that I'm going to apply is using grid template areas. You may recall there's a lot of ways to use the display grid. I'm going to use grid template areas on this project. Template areas is the one where we put a series of string literals in between double quotes that establish the rows and the columns for our template. And they have to be in the value section of my declaration here. So in between the colon and semicolon. I'm going to give a little bit of vertical space here. Normally we don't put a series of values on separate lines, but in this case it just makes sense because visually we're making rows. So this is going to be one row, another. I'm going to have 6 rows here for my header, nav, feature, main, side, and footer. And what I have to do now is establish my template. Header, and I'm going to put this in here 5 times. I'm making my web page a 5-column template. The reason is that when I get to the widest screen, I'm going to have my main and my side take up 3/5 and 2/5 of the width of the browser respectively. So it makes sense to have 5 columns. And then I want my feature to not go from side to side at the widest screens. I want it to sit in the middle and only take up 3/5 and have an open column on the left and right. So having 5 columns just makes sense for this project. Feature comes next because it goes header, nav, feature. So my 3rd row is the feature. Get 5 of them. Main comes next. That's the 4th row. Side comes next. Then footer is going to be on the bottom. Now, this is not going to work yet. Think back to the grid template areas videos. I don't just set up the template, but I also have to name all of my elements that I'm rearranging, all of the child elements using grid area. So I have to make style rules for each of those elements. So I'm going to make a style rule for header, give it the declaration grid area, and then I have to name it. Now here's the thing about grid areas. I have to make sure that the grid area matches the name that I put in the template. So my header, I use the name header right here. So these two things have to match. If they don't, it's just not going to work. I'm going to make a style rule for nav, use grid area on it, and up here in the template, I called it nav, so I have to name it nav here. Feature comes next. Look at the HTML. My feature is a section called class feature. So I'm selecting it based on a class. So I use the dot operator, dot feature, grid area, and up in my template, I simply called it feature. I'll select it just so that I don't make a mistake. So copied and pasted it. If we look at my HTML, my main section is called main content. So class main content. Dot main content for my style rule. Area. And in my template, I called it main. See? Main. My side content is also a class. Let's see what it's named. So aside class side content. Copy that. Paste it here. It is a class, so it's dot side content. Grid area. And up in the template, I called it side. See, right there. So I have to make sure this matches perfectly. And then my footer is just an element, so I'm selecting footer. Grid area, and I named it in my template simply footer. Now if I save this and check it in the browser, you're going to see that at the grid, you're not actually going to see anything special because my template is just a vertical stack where every single element takes up all 5 columns. So there's nothing special going on here yet. Let's really quickly modify our grid template areas here to see if we can make it look like a multi-column layout. So remember, each of these establishes a row, and in each row, we've got a series of arguments that are going to be columns. So I said that I wanted the feature to just sit in the middle and have a space on the left and right side so the right and left columns aren't used. And I said that I wanted my main to take up 3/5 and my side to take up 2/5. So in this row, I'm going to establish my main column and my side column. And then I'm going to delete that row, save it, and check it in the browser and see if it did. Ooh, it looked like it did what it was supposed to do. You saw my feature kind of shifted over into the center, and there's a space there and a space there. And you can see, hey, I got my 2 columns. My main is sitting off to the left, and my side is sitting right off to the right. Great, so I know my grid is working as it should. But we're designing from mobile first perspective. This is not going to look good on a mobile. I'm going to debug it really quickly. I'm going to see what it will look like on an iPhone 12, for example. This gets really, really crunched. You look at this column, that's way too small. It looks like garbage. This one is a little bit too small. They're really scrunched together. No one would want to read this web page on a phone. Okay? So if it is mobile default, I want to make sure that I go back to what I had, save it, and on mobile it should look more like this. This is a much better read on a phone. But as it gets bigger, those lines are going to get way too long. So let's set up some media queries so that it can respond as it gets larger and larger. So at media, screen, and min width, and I'm going to say 48M or rem. So remember, rems, they're a relative unit that looks at the font size of the root element of your web page. So it's going to look at the HTML element and see what the font size is. By default, in most browsers, the font size is 16 pixels. 48 rem says it's 16 times 48. So 16 times 48 comes out to 768. So at a pixel width of 768, it's going to break and do something different. Okay? My next media query is going to be for widescreen, which is 64 rem. If you did your calculations there, 64 rem, 64 times 16 is 1024, 1024 pixels wide. So when it gets larger than 1024 pixels wide, it's going to do something else. All right, let's just test these media queries. I'm going to put a background color in them. So what I need to do is I need to select something. I'm going to go .grid container, and I'm going to change its background color to different colors at the different breakpoints. So at medium size, it's going to be yellow. And at large size, it's going to be red. And let's see if it responds as desired. Hey, look at that. On large size right now, it's red. That seems to be working. Let's inspect it. Let's go down to the medium size. So we said our breakpoint was 768. At 768, it should break down to yellow. 769. Oh, sorry, at 1024, it should break up to red. Anything below 1024? Oops, that's way too big. At 1023, it breaks to yellow. So you can see those two responsive breakpoints are working. Now, I don't want to change the background colors at different sizes because that's just obnoxious, but I do want to do something with the grid container. I want to modify the grid template at different sizes. I want it to look different at different sizes. So I'm going to go to grid template areas, and I'm going to paste this into both. And what I said I wanted to happen is at the medium size, I wanted it to have the feature sit in the center. And then at the large size, I wanted the feature to sit in the center. And then I also wanted 2 columns. So I'm going to modify my main row to have main, side, side, and then take off the side row entirely. Let's save it and check it in the browser now. This is 1023, and you can see that my feature is sitting in the middle with 2 empty columns on left and right. Currently, it's a vertical stack. These lines are really long, but I'm going to have to correct that at some point. Let's look at 1024. You can see it broke to this multi-column layout. And then at my smallest sizes, it's going to be a vertical stack. So now I've got my 3 breakpoints established that are going to respond to different types of devices and hopefully look good on all those devices. There's one last thing that I'm going to do in this video before we go away, and I'm going to put some grid gaps in. So we can have a little bit of space between things. And I'm going to go with 1 rem to start with, and then if I want to tweak that later on in my design, I can. But now you can see there's a little bit of gap right there in between them. I'm probably going to modify that later. But in the last couple videos, I'm going to handle all of the white space. I'm going to put things like margins and paddings in and make the whole entire page look really good. But for now, we've established our grid. We've established how it's going to break at different breakpoints and rearrange some of the things. In a future video, we're going to do more with that. On small and medium, I'm going to have the logo in different places. The nav is going to appear different on medium and large. Our feature is going to rearrange itself on large and medium, and I'm probably going to constrain the width of the whole page on different sizes. All right, thanks for watching and tune in for the next video.